So people have been talking about Anita Sarkeesian again, and it just so happens I've been sat on my own throwback video regarding Sarkeesian for a while. It's actually a video I made once before, but I was never very happy with it, and I have a lot more to say now in hindsight. I also believe I actually deleted the video because I was so unhappy with it. Side note, I'm probably going to redo a lot of my older videos at some point because really, that audio from my old videos is just awful. So bad. Anyway, so I want to talk about that time that Sarkeesian went on the Colbert Report and Thunderf00t and the wider Gamergate community was just so angry, just insanely angry. What I want to show in this video is that none of these people seem to understand satire, or even the fundamentals of humour. So Thunderf00t made 2 videos about Sarkeesian being on the Colbert Report, because of course he did. Sarkeesian can't sneeze without Phil making at least 2 videos about it. So let's jump in.
So, Anita Sarkeesian has decided to embrace the king of misogynist haters.
Stop. This is the first indication that Phil doesn't know what he is talking about. Now, admittedly, we do have hindsight on this matter now. We know from Colbert's more serious talk show that he is very clearly a progressive on most issues, including women's issues. It is now very obvious he's a feminist, but it should have been obvious back then, considering the fact his entire show was about satirizing right-wing pundits. By sarcastically calling Colbert the king of the misogynists, he is suggesting that this is what Sarkeesian believes, and that therefore she is a hypocrite for appearing on his show.
Given the choice between rubbing shoulders with the stars and not making waves, or taking on the virtual embodiment of the patriarchal crowdsourcing police, her choice was very clear.
Even though it's very clear that nobody believes that about Colbert. Also, we'll just ignore the creepy, misogynistic and dismissive infantilization of Sarkeesian for being giddy as a schoolgirl.
Misogynist haters by appearing giddy as a schoolgirl, I might mention.
The word you're looking for is happy. And you know Phil is the kind of guy who thinks Captain Marvel is going to be shit because Brie Larson doesn't smile enough. Okay, so why does Phil think that Colbert is leader of the misogynists? After all, it must come from somewhere. Clearly Colbert presents himself as a feminist. So how is Phil going to convince us that Sarkeesian is in some way abandoning her principles? Well, because of Sway Park.
Now, let me remind you, back in the day, there was this poor persecuted woman called Sway Park.
Now, for those who don't remember, Park was the Asian American woman who launched a #CancelColbert campaign on Twitter after Colbert made a satirical tweet comparing the Washington Redskins to a hypothetical Ching Chong Ding Dong Foundation for sensitivity to Orientals or whatever. Now, this was obviously satire, and for this reason most people did not stand by Park. The general perception was that Park lacked an appreciation for nuance and didn't really understand the satirical nature of the tweet. This is important because in this video I'm going to demonstrate that Phil and the wider Gamergate community also lacks an appreciation for nuance and doesn't really understand satire. I suppose I'll just say that I understand that some people might think it wasn't Colbert's place to make this joke. I don't agree with those people, but I understand. I think Park came in far too belligerent and made it hard for people to be sympathetic to her, and ultimately it's not surprising that every single major figure I know of came down on the side of Colbert being in the right. Nonetheless, I'm not in the business of shutting down marginalized groups for being angry. Anyway, so it's worth noting this is why Phil identified Colbert as the king of the misogynists, because he made a racial tweet. Not only that, but he made a tweet that a very small minority of people had a problem with, while the majority of liberals, progressives, feminists, and leftists accepted it as satire. But if being attacked by progressives and SJWs makes you king of the misogynists, then I'm king of the misogynists. Most progressives could claim that title, because SJW circles are incredibly self-critical and filled with infighting. This isn't a bad thing. It allows for our ideas to be refined, and there are many ideas I wouldn't hold to now if other progressives hadn't challenged my ideas in the past. So what we have here is Phil identifying Colbert as king of the misogynists because one woman got offended by his racially insensitive tweet, and therefore Sarkeesian is a hypocrite for appearing on his show.
For me, the doughy-eyed, starstruck Anita says it all about her priorities.
Phil is implying that if any SJW anywhere gets offended by anything you've said, it therefore follows that you must be enemies with the wider progressive community, and any progressive who meets up with you must be a hypocrite. Okay, but maybe I'm being unfair. It doesn't matter that the wider SJW circle disavowed Park's criticisms. What matters is how Sarkeesian responded, and this is where Phil brings his A game. You see, Sarkeesian linked to an article which said that people should stop harassing Park.
And people like Anita Sarkeesian stood shoulder to shoulder with Sway Park against the evil oppressors, calling this article a must read.
Wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. I have in the past made videos criticizing other YouTubers, and in those very videos I have said that I don't support attacking those YouTubers. So clearly it's possible to disagree with somebody's argument while saying such a person should not be harassed. Indeed, if you look for evidence that Sarkeesian did offer her support for Park, you can't help but find a whole load of articles from feminists that all say the same thing. Cancel Colbert was a stupid hashtag, but the attacks on Park are disgusting, including one article from the lovely Meghan Murphy. And you know who else says this? Stephen Colbert.
Now, all of this was started by a hashtag activist, or hashtivist, who has been viciously attacked on Twitter. And if anyone is doing that for me, I want you to stop right now. She's just speaking her mind, and that's what Twitter's for.
Fun fact, Phil actually includes this clip immediately before that line, but doesn't include Colbert denouncing the harassment of Park, because that would totally destroy his argument.
Gets a backlash from Comedy Central fans, and she gets mocked by the Colbert Report.
But when I saw the tweet with no context, Irish babies, hashtag cancel Swift, trend it. Now, all of this was started by a hashtag activist.
Phil is well known for his slimy editing practices, so you can pretty much always prove him wrong just by finding the videos he includes in his videos and watching the clips 5 seconds either side of where he edited them, and you'll usually find that Phil's arguments collapse in on themselves. Because yes, Colbert himself said that he thinks that Park has misunderstood the satirical intent of his tweet and that she is wrong, but that the people attacking Park need to stop. Now, you aren't going to find any evidence that Sarkeesian agreed with Park. You are only going to find evidence that she denounced the harassment of Park. We know that many other people who actually denounced Park also denounced the harassment of her, including many other feminists and also Colbert himself. It seems that to conflate opposing the harassment of Park to agreement with Park is disingenuous, and there is certainly no basis to conclude that Sarkeesian is a hypocrite. Of course, Phil seems to think that harassment was made up.
Social justice warrior mode engage. She was subjected to a sustained campaign of harassment directed exclusively towards women by misogynists.
Despite the fact that Colbert himself acknowledged it.
Who has been viciously attacked on Twitter.
The fact that Phil is doubting that an Asian woman who has been made the subject of public ridicule would also find herself subject to racist and misogynistic harassment shows just how intentionally ignorant Phil is when it comes to the experience of anybody who isn't a white man. It's like Phil thinks that legitimate criticism and harassment are mutually exclusive, in the sense that if some people were criticizing Park legitimately, it therefore follows that nobody could have been harassing Park with misogynistic and racist language.
The cyber mob that is still attacking Sarkeesian and Park is the virtual embodiment of patriarchy's crowdsourced police. So, did you get that? The audience of Stephen Colbert is the virtual embodiment of the patriarchal crowdsourcing police attacking Suey Park.
I think I'm a very generous person because I honestly believe Phil is an idiot. I actually believe he is just really dumb. And the reason why that's charitable is that the alternative would be to say he's dishonest and intentionally manipulative. And I actually don't think he is. There are people like Paul Joseph Watson, Lauren Southern and Black Pigeon Speaks where you know that to some extent they realise they're talking bullshit, but bullshit is good business. However, something about the childlike joy with which Phil makes his arguments just tells me that he really thinks he's right, and for that reason I will give him some credit. It isn't as dishonest and cynical as most of the anti-feminist reactions on YouTube. However, he is still a moron, because he is conflating the people attacking Park with Colbert's audience.
And this sparked a big controversy where she was essentially told by Stephen Colbert fans to stop being such a whiny little precious snowflake.
Now, why does he do that? What indication is there that these two groups have much overlap at all? I'm not part of Colbert's audience, but I still express an opinion on the cancel Colbert controversy. Does Phil actually think that 100% of people commenting on this issue are necessarily part of Colbert's audience? I mean, Phil is commenting on it, and I'm not sure he is a regular watcher of Colbert's show. And not only that, but the overlap is apparently so great that those doing the harassment can be conflated with Colbert's entire audience. These are the logical leaps that Phil makes so that at the end of it he can accuse Sarkeesian of being a hypocrite because she went on the Colbert show.
So why would Sarkeesian possibly want to go and talk to such an audience full of misogynistic haters?
He also draws a parallel between Park and Sarkeesian, shown here by this graphic.
She gets invited on the Colbert Report to share her terrible experiences. Sadly, Comedy Central, you just dropped the ball on this one.
So in this case, Phil is basically accusing the Colbert Report of hypocrisy, but he is only doing so by claiming it is obvious that Sarkeesian is stupid, which has not been sufficiently demonstrated. I mean, yes, Phil has made many videos attempting to show that Sarkeesian is wrong, but, well, they're filled with all the same misrepresentations and faulty logic that is present in this video. Oh, and finally, the Colbert show is hypocritical because they mock the news media at one point, but then use the news media as a source at a later point.
Comedy Central goes on to do their background reading on exactly those same publications that they were happy to criticize because they did all of their research on Twitter.
But he's again just assuming that there wasn't any fact checking occurring behind the scenes. I can mock an article by one site for being inaccurate and use a different article from that same site as a source because the latter article gives me no reason to doubt its credibility. Anyway, so then we get the second video which begins,
I mean, I just cannot believe what pussies Comedy Central have turned into.
Here's the thing, dickhead. Did you ever consider the fact that Comedy Central's concern isn't people directing criticism at them, but rather a disgusting and toxic comment section regarding the guests they had on the show? Phil frames Comedy Central as being afraid of all the hard facts that were in the comment section, when really they were probably just saddened and disgusted by the vitriol there instead. You don't get to be a shitty garbage human being and then claim that your opponents are afraid of you when they take away your platform. And I don't know what the comments were like before this video, but given the documented harassment of Sarkeesian, I do know what the comments were like before this video. They were as shitty as the comments always are whenever anti-feminists are given an open forum to have their rational debates. Anyway, so then he actually spends a lot of the video showing that he doesn't understand the difference between criticism and harassment by contrasting Colbert making jokes about Sarah Palin with Sarkeesian talking about the harassment she receives.
Politicians? No, brutal satire for them. Comments, you can say what you want about them. But Anita Sarkeesian, well known for her outrageously dishonest videos. Oh no, you've got to be nice to her.
Actually, I think it has more to do with the fact that Sarkeesian is most known for being one of the most hated women on the internet, being subject to all sorts of disgusting threats by subhumans who lack any sense of empathy and decency. That is the big difference, Phil. It isn't that the entire world has decided to throw critical thinking out the window for the sake of this one woman, it's that the whole world saw what was done to this woman and they were disgusted by it.
What happened is a pretty young feminist walked through the door and you and the other folks at Comedy Central were bending over backwards to cut off your own balls and give them to her to keep in her little felt purse.
So here we have Phil reducing the issue down to Sarkeesian being pretty and suggesting that is the only reason she is taken seriously, because that's the only way anyone could ever take a woman seriously. Now Phil, I realise that you think Sarkeesian is some kind of goddess and that's why you're so obsessed with her.
And yet you've still managed to have been brought to heel by a pretty little professional victim feminist.
But in my mind, she's kind of just okay, right? I mean, she's attractive enough, but not abandon all my principles and journalistic integrity pretty. Basically, Phil, you're projecting.
I've heard on the grapevine that Sarkeesian was asked that if she accepted that games don't cause violence, then why should they cause sexism? And because she couldn't answer it, this was edited out, to keep her happy.
However, I'm actually going to give this Reddit comment the benefit of the doubt. You see, that's an obvious question. It's a common question. Why do video games cause misogyny if they don't cause violence? So I'm going to pretend to be Sarkeesian and answer this question as I would. Well, there's a difference between encouraging an action versus encouraging an idea. The violence in video games very rarely communicates an idea. By contrast, when you have missions that are about spying on women or games where getting the girl at the end is treated as a reward, then that communicates a certain idea about how men should view women. On top of this, most men understand that extreme acts of violence are wrong. But in a society where men have historically held most social, political and economic power, it's not so clear that viewing women as trophies or objects is wrong. That's the main issue, that the misogyny in media is as much an expression of societal misogyny as it is a cause for it. That's how I'd answer it. And there is an obvious reason why that might be cut, because it's not funny. Now, do you know what is funny? That bit where Colbert asks Sarkeesian to name 3 games, and that's what I want to talk about.
And that would be an accurate title, yeah.
Give me some names. Name some names.
So, in the work that I do, I look at hundreds of examples of video games, and I identify...
Can you think of 3?
I can, but I think it's a bigger issue to talk about the industry as a whole.
So I'm going to explain the joke here because I think a lot of people are confused. You see, Colbert is playing the role of the reactionary. He's being intentionally reductionist by acting as if a complex societal issue can be reduced down to 3 video games. The crowd laughs at this because they understand humour. Sarkeesian also laughs and plays along. As the straight woman, she attempts to explain that the issue can't be reduced down to 3 video games, but rather with a wider problem across video games and in society in general. Colbert plays off Sarkeesian and continues to push his character of an obnoxious and obtuse critic. It's very clear that Colbert is playing this character, by the way.
You and the other feminazis in the gamer world first attacked male gamers for enjoying looking at big-breasted women with tiny armor that barely covers their nipples. I'm saving the princess. Am I supposed to let the princess die? Is that what you want?
And it's also very clear that Sarkeesian is playing the straight woman.
No. Well, one of the problems with that is it actually reinforces this cultural myth that women are sexual objects and sexual playthings. Well, maybe the princess shouldn't be a damsel and she could save herself.
Well, they've got games where... They've got games... I didn't know you brought a posse.
Now, if Sarkeesian had just named 3 games, well then that clip should have ended up on the cutting room floor, because it wouldn't be funny. What's funny is seeing a caricature of somebody with no appreciation for nuance asking for the names of 3 video games, while the more reasonable person points out that's not really the issue.
Can you think of 3? Can you think of 3?
I can.
Seeing the caricature ask for 3 names and then just seeing somebody name 3 games would not be funny. Now this is the problem. The Gamergate people missed the joke. They completely dropped the ball in the worst possible way, and I don't really want anybody to forget just how idiotic they showed themselves to be by failing to follow the structure of this routine. So Phil attempts to compare Sarkeesian not naming 3 games to Sarah Palin not naming 3 newspapers. He actually stretches out the video by intercutting between the 2 clips, making it seem like Sarkeesian was being really rambly. In reality, Colbert asks for some names, and Sarkeesian clarifies that she looks at hundreds of examples of video games, and then Colbert asks if she can name 3, to which Sarkeesian says that she can, but she thinks it's important to look at the wider issues instead of just focusing on Grand Theft Auto, for example. Phil makes this look like an incredibly incoherent response with choppy editing, and as I say, alludes to the Sarah Palin interview. However, this is actually only a 20-second period between Colbert asking for a name and Sarkeesian providing one, while the interview with Palin regarding what newspaper she uses lasts 50 seconds. Moreover, the comparisons are different, and I would actually like to make a better comparison. Suppose that Donald Trump is talking about the fake news media and somebody walks up to him and says, name 3 examples of fake news. Donald Trump would be perfectly justified in saying that the issue is not about just one particular news outlet, or 3 even, but it's about a wider problem with sensationalism and misdirection from the news media. Indeed, if Trump were to repeatedly refuse to name any particular news outlet and focus entirely on the systemic issue, then not only would I not mock Trump for that, but I consider it to be an example of him being anomalously intelligent. In reality, I think we both know he would just name 3 news outlets that disagree with him most of the time. Likewise, Sarkeesian could easily have named 3 games. Of course she could have named 3 games. But naming 3 games would have undermined her essential argument, which is that the problem is with broad trends rather than just the occasional sexist game. And on top of this, we have the fact that she is being the straight woman in a comedy show, so it makes sense for her to enable Colbert to continue his reductionist line of questioning.
Why not just have a separate game? Have separate but equal games.
By contrast, Palin is being spoken to in a serious context, and her inability to name particular newspapers she reads suggests she isn't politically informed, since most politically informed people will have some go-to newspapers. In my case, for example, you wouldn't be surprised to learn that it's The Guardian. And we should also take this into its wider context. Sarah Palin did not know what the Bush Doctrine was.
Well, what do you interpret it to be?
His worldview?
No, the Bush Doctrine, enunciated September 2002, before the Iraq War.
Which is indicative of somebody who isn't very politically informed. By contrast, Sarkeesian has a series of rigorous analyses of video games on her channel, and whatever you think of them, it's quite hard to deny that she must be at least a bit familiar with video games in order to make them. But from this, we go to the hilarious hashtag Name3Games, where anti-feminists went onto Twitter and triumphantly named 3 games to show that they could do the thing that Anita Sarkeesian refused to do because she felt that just reducing the problem down to 3 games would be missing the point. They really are trying to drive the point home that they truly don't understand anything. I like this guy who says that while it's fun that they're winning hard because of Sarkeesian's poor performance, they need to remember to not stop winning by writing emails to people about ethics in video games or something. And even if Sarkeesian couldn't name 3 games, which she could have, she obviously could have, we all know she could have, but even if she couldn't have, it would still be incredibly nitpicky to start rallying around a woman being temporarily unable to name a game, even though she could have named a game. Imagine how nice it would be to lack so much self-awareness that you can be so obviously wrong and still think you are winning. And then we get this guy showing a bit of self-awareness by pointing out that the whole interaction maybe had an element of satire, and then this guy basically admits that, yeah, they're essentially encouraging people to take things out of context and treat Sarkeesian as if she didn't know what she was talking about, even though she was clearly playing into an insincere conversation. Reminder that these people think that Sarkeesian takes things out of context in video games. And I think it kind of sucks that people might forget just how dumb the anti-Sarkeesian folks showed themselves to be. This is part of a larger problem I've seen with anti-feminists and reactionaries not seeming to understand jokes and why they are funny, but this one really is just great for me. We start off with Park misunderstanding Colbert's satire and being broadly condemned by the progressive left, even while they oppose the harassment of her, and then we end with Gamergate misunderstanding Colbert's satire and getting a standing ovation from the Gamergate anti-feminist reactionaries. It's almost poetic. What an absolute joke of a movement. Anyway, subscribe, like, comment. This is actually a video I would prefer to be popular because I think it's such a funny thing. So if you've never liked one of my videos before, maybe make this your first time. Heck, maybe even share it. My next video, by the way, is going to be on Jeremy Corbyn, and I think I have some good takes on that, so stick around. Also, I'm trying a thing where I speak really fast because I just think maybe it will make it slightly more interesting to everyone. Hope it does. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. So let me know below what you think about me speaking really fast, because I kind of just came up with the idea right now, because, you know, I already recorded this once in kind of slow mode, and I was like, tell you what, let's just try talking really fast, you know, because it sounded boring. And one of the things I do on YouTube is I listen to videos in double speed. Like, I'll usually listen to videos in double speed, so I'm kind of used to, like, everything being really fast, but I never really speak very fast in my videos because I'm like, well, you know, people just listen to it at double speed, but maybe people don't listen to my videos in double speed, in which case that means they're probably getting this really, really slow experience, because when I listen to my videos back, I listen to them in double speed, so for me it sounds pretty fast, but I'm going to try it like this, see how it sounds.